I'm Angela.
Et je suis Jean.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Innovation Live.
Nous nous trouvons présentement dans un hangar du Conseil national de recherche du Canada près de l'aéroport d'Ottawa.
Le Conseil national de recherche du Canada est le plus grand organisme de recherche du pays. Il soutient l'innovation industrielle, l'avancement des connaissances, le développement technologique ainsi que la réalisation de mandats du gouvernement.
Just beside us is the National Research Council's research plane, the Falcon 20. This plane is the host for the second annual Canadian Reduced Gravity Experiment Design Challenge, also known as CAN-RGX.
The Canadian Reduced Gravity Experiment Design Challenge is an annual competition in which teams of Canadian post-secondary students can submit a project proposal. Once selected, the teams get to test the small-scale scientific experiments on board the NRC's plane, which has been modified to simulate reduced gravity while in flight.
Ce phénomène s'appelle la microgravité. Chaque année, 4 équipes sont choisies pour élaborer une expérience et en faire l'essai à bord de l'avion qui est juste près de nous.
Today, we have some very unique guests with us. We're joined by Duff Gowanlock, flight test engineer of the Falcon 20, as well as Twesh Ubadia, primary mission specialist for the Fluid Affected by Magnetism experiment, also known as the FAM experiment, from the University of Toronto. Him and his team are setting up today, since they will go up and test their experiment over the next couple of days. So fellows, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Duff, we'll start with you. You'll be guiding the test on the National Research Council's Falcon 20 microgravity plane. Whew, that was a lot to say. It also seems like an interesting job. We received a question from Karine on Facebook. She would like to know what first got you interested in space and if you always knew that you wanted to go down this career path.
Oh, wow. I've always been interested in space. When I was a little kid, fascinated with aviation and space, I actually wrote to NASA, not being aware of NRC actually, wrote to NASA to learn more. And actually, JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Johnson Space Center, sent me back material, and it just sort of captivated me from that point on. And really, love of aviation, love of space has guided me through my career since then.
Okay. And can you tell us how you did get to that specific point in your career now?
Yeah. So I've only been at the NRC for a couple of years now. I was in the Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force before that. I joined right out of high school and was fortunate to get my BEng with them and then study a master's. And then about 15 years ago, I was selected to go to test pilot school, and that was what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a flight test engineer. And so for the last 15 years, working in the Air Force, flight testing technology, and new aircraft for the Air Force. And then an opportunity came to join the council here and deal with more not so well-developed technology and do a little bit more developmental work. And it's really the perfect opportunity for me. And I think the Flight Research Lab is really the pinnacle place to do flight test and flight research in Canada.
C'est tout à fait intéressant. C'est même passionnant, je dirais.
Oh oui, absolument. So,
oui,
yeah,
oui.
It's lifelong passion. I'm a private pilot as well. I love aviation in all forms.
Full of talents.
I don't know that.
Est-ce que, Duff, vous pourriez nous dire en quoi la microgravité est intéressante pour toi personnellement?
Sans doute, c'est l'occasion de travailler avec les grands talents de nos universités, comme Twesh, et aussi avec les chercheurs en industrie. Nous faisons l'expérimentation autour de la grande gamme de recherche. D'un côté, en études des physiques fondamentaux, et de l'autre côté, nous répondons aux questions très appliquées. Et on peut faire toutes ces recherches dans le Falcon.
Okay.
And how do you feel about guiding the different teams during their flights?
It's a great experience. Every time CAN-RGX competition comes to NRC, there's a long line of people that want to participate. The talent of the students is phenomenal. The quality of the experiments that they bring, the research topics that they're studying are cutting edge. They're answering questions that need to be answered to support missions to Mars. And if you follow Elon Musk, his visions of colonizing the moon, which are not only his visions, many others as well. But it's just amazing, and it's really just a pleasure and an honor to help them go through the steps of developing an experiment to be flight ready, and then go up and have some fun and float the Falcon. I mean, that's an experience that so few people get a chance to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. And actually, for our viewers, nous allons maintenant vous montrer une vidéo qui démontre justement l'expérience des équipes participant au Canadian Reduced Gravity Experiment Design Challenge à bord du Falcon 20 au cours d'un vol en microgravité. This clip was actually during Wow, that seems like such a thrill. You must be super excited. Can you tell us, Twesh, how you feel about this incredible opportunity?
Absolutely. It's so exciting to be here, surrounded by all the excellent facilities, all the really cool planes around here at the NRC. It's such a unique opportunity, especially as an undergraduate student, to get to embark on this, experience the whole experiment design process from start to finish, and of course get to experience microgravity in NRC's very own Falcon 20. So really excited to be here and really looking forward to the experiments we'll do and the experience we're going to have here.
Good. So in the next few days, you and your team will be taking your experiment up in microgravity. Can you describe for our viewers and for us too what your project is all about?
Absolutely. So convection is a phenomenon we're very familiar with here on Earth, from heating a pot of water on the stove and watching it rise to all sorts of weather and wind effects that we see, which is just the rising of hot fluid. And really the idea behind convection is that when a fluid like air or water heats up, it becomes less dense, and so it rises to the top of the fluid, while the cooler fluid on top sinks down. And so this rising and falling is what we call convection. But in microgravity, the concept of lighter and heavier doesn't really have any meaning anymore.
True, yeah.
So you don't actually get convection naturally in microgravity. So our experiment is about simulating convection artificially using magnetic fields.
Okay.
And to do this, we use a special fluid called a paramagnetic fluid that reacts to magnetism in the same way as regular fluids react to gravity. So our setup involves placing this fluid in a cell and using magnetic fields to stimulate this artificial convection. And finally, we have an optical setup called Schlieren imaging, and basically this enables us to see the temperature of the fluid, so we can visually pick out what the temperature is without having to use any thermometer or anything.
And how do you see it? Is it like different colors, or how does that work?
You see it on kind of a shade from light to dark, so it's
Okay.
an optical trick, so it lets you basically turn the temperature differences into differences in your light, and we of course record these
Okay.
for, yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Impressive.
And I'm totally impressed, yeah. Et je sens déjà ton enthousiasme, ta passion. C'est vraiment beau de voir. Pour le public, est-ce que c'est possible de nous dire en quoi la microgravité, cette expérience-là en microgravité, va aider à ton équipe et toi dans le cadre de vos recherches?
Oui. La microgravité nous permet d'étudier la convection magnétique en isolement.
Oui.
Le fait que nous recherchons est très faible. Si on chauffe un fluide au sol, on obtient une convection ordinaire
Oui.
qui masque la convection magnétique. Quand nous faisons appel à des fluides magnétiques, nous pourrions utiliser un champ magnétique pour annuler l'effet de la gravité. Toutefois, puisque le réchauffement du fluide modifie sa façon de réagir au magnétisme, nous ne pouvons simplement avoir recours à un champ magnétique pour annuler l'effet de la gravité. Bref, parce que nous combinons la chaleur et les champs magnétiques,
Oui.
l'expérience ne peut être menée pas au sol et donc nécessite un environnement de microgravité.
Oui,
Okay.
okay. Well, actually, as a follow-up question, we did get one from the public, and it's actually from Kristen on Twitter. Now, Kristen asked, why is research in microgravity important, and what will your team, the FAM team, be looking at specifically? I know you've mentioned things, but maybe if you want to specify and or repeat some of your things in English.
Absolutely. So I think, there's really two aspects to microgravity research, and first and perhaps most directly is, in fact, improving systems that are going to be in space, from
Yep.
spacecraft, satellites, and as more and more space technologies are being developed, it's important to address some of these issues, such as heat transfer, which I'll talk about. But there's also a second huge component, which is the trickle down of these technologies to everyday life here on Earth. So whether we're talking about Velcro or just one of the many technologies that have come out of the space
Yeah.
program, we see that the effects of them are direct for microgravity, but can also have a huge impact on us here on Earth. And kind of the specific problem that motivated us to study this experiment was this issue of heat transfer in space systems. So convection is super effective at transferring heat, and that's why we put heat sinks on our CPUs, and we expect that they won't burn up. But we actually just read a recent paper that had come out talking about heat pipes in microgravity and how the hot fluid just stays at the hot end and the cold fluid stays at the cold end, and you don't really get the cycling that you need. So
Yeah.
what we're hoping to see is that if we can find a strong convective phenomenon, we can perhaps make some small steps towards improving convection in space so that you can use the same systems you use on Earth with artificial convection.
Okay.
Wow. So, but why did you and your team decided to tackle this particular experiment, and how long was the road that to come to that point, like in the project?
Absolutely. So we were, looking around at a whole whack of experiments, things that really took advantage of the microgravity. And we eventually settled on this one because it really brought together a lot of different fields, from fluid dynamics to electromagnetism to the optical imaging of the system. And so it was a really important synthesis of various fields, which is tough to do in other microgravity environments. For example, in a drop tower, you don't have enough time for convection to fully develop, and it would be tough to do with such sensitive equipment. We also found this experiment was a really interesting combination of fundamental physics and engineering. And as students in engineering science and myself being in engineering physics, I thought it was a really nice interplay between the design of the experiment and the very practical engineering considerations, as well as the more foundational physics that we had to study in order to design it. And this experiment really takes advantage of being in a microgravity environment, and it's something we simply can't replicate on Earth.
Okay, true.
I'd also like to go back to Karin's question from Facebook. What first got you interested in space, and did you always know that you wanted to go down that career path?
I think I've been interested in space, ever since I was a kid. I can remember maybe in grade 6 writing down in my career path, I want to be an astrophysicist, and always really loving, always loving the.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, always really loving the physics that is involved in space, and sort of the mystery and the fact that we can go beyond, our planet, explore, broaden our horizons, and I think there's something in it from everyone, from the piloting and flying spacecraft to the engineering, physics, biology. It's really something that can help bring us all together and truly have a lot of potential for mankind.
Definitely.
I think so far you are the most popular guest that we received, because we received quite a few questions for you from our viewers. So we have a question for you from Chris, who would like to know what are your future career goals and if you want to do more research on microgravity.
Absolutely. So I think my future career goals immediately would be to go to graduate school, most likely in like theoretical physics and a more physics science-based thing. And absolutely, Chris. I mean, I'm certainly interested in doing more research in microgravity, and I hope to first, see the results of this experiment and see if there's potentially ways we can extend it or continue our analysis on Earth to kind of tie together this with simulations that we've done on the ground.
Well,
Yes.
that sounds fantastic. I know I'm learning a lot
Well, me
today. But listen, if you still have a bit in you, we do have one last question
Absolutely.
from the public, and this is also to you, Twesh. So this one comes from Adam on Facebook, and Adam asks, do you think that your work on heat transfer and magnetism could help in some way minimize fire damage in orbiting spacecrafts?
I think it's tough to obviously see the connection immediately, but
Okay.
as I said, with microgravity, experiments, especially this sort of fundamental research, the lessons you learn and the experience you gain can always be transferred to other areas. And in this case, perhaps not the fire directly, but with issues of how that heat that's being applied spreads throughout a wall. That's indeed something that could be studied, if at the very least through validating the models of how heat spreads in microgravity.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
So it's pretty much all the time we had today. So we would like to thank you all for watching and for your great questions. If you have any additional questions for Duff or for Twesh and his team, please submit them in the comment section below, and we will do our best to respond. And by we, I don't mean us. Don't worry.
Alors, nous vous remercions très, très sincèrement, Duff et Twesh, d'avoir pris le temps aujourd'hui et de nous renseigner également sur les recherches innovatrices qui se produisent en microgravité, ainsi que sur la compétition CAN-RGX. C'était tout à fait fascinant.
Now it's almost time for your flight, so good luck to you and to all the teams that are participating in the Canadian Reduced Gravity Experiment Design Challenge.
Et pour vous, chers téléspectateurs, n'oubliez surtout pas d'aimer et de suivre cette page pour rester à l'affût. Ainsi, vous serez informés de notre prochain épisode.
Et oui, bien sûr, nous sommes en direct maintenant, mais comme vous le savez, cette vidéo restera sur notre page. Alors, vous allez pouvoir la partager avec vos amis qui n'ont pas pu se joindre à nous aujourd'hui. So, thank you and see you next time on Innovation
Live.